Now, if you're new to Warframe, which a lot of people are right now with how good it is, there is an absolute army of Warframes ahead of you to farm, to build, and of course to mod into the planetary killers that they can become. 55 Warframes at the time of making this video. But what Warframes do veterans recommend to new players? Let me know in the comment section below. We are going to try and keep this as short and sweet and to the point as we possibly can, and we're going to chapter it as long as I remember, that is, so remind me if I forget. But before I start, I do need to quickly mention the 3 starter Warframes and also pretty much the basic mod setup that as a new player you're going to be using on almost all of your Warframes, with the exception of a few frames until you get corrupted mods, augur mods, primed mods, arcanes, archon shards, and everything else that makes us insanely powerful right now. This would be an example of the basic starter mod setup for new players. For a lot of Warframes, you can only work with what you have on you at any given time, so until you get the later mods, this will do you. Now, Excalibur, Mag, and Volt are all amazing Warframes, the 3 starter options. Just be aware that after you've picked one of these to start the game, the other 2 Warframes are absolutely worth your time to farm and eventually build. Excalibur is Mr. Balance, right? He is the poster boy for the game and the Warframe that most new players will pick. He is a very well-rounded, straightforward Warframe who is ideal for players who like a bit of an aggressive playstyle, but also he's more balanced than what the other 2 options are when you're starting out. Now, Mag is a bit more fragile but can also crowd control and deal huge damage numbers. However, as you progress through the game, she becomes an absolute powerhouse who can and will carry you through all of the game's content. For me, right now, Mag is one of the best Warframes in the entire game, but maybe I'm a little bit biased. Volt is fast-paced and aggressive, incredibly versatile, huge crowd control Warframe, can speedrun certain missions. He is a nuke with a right build as well, and he can regen shield like crazy, and later on, he can as well easily carry you through everything that the game has to throw at you. Volt is also an incredible starter option. But like I said, whichever of the 3 Warframes you initially start the game with, the other 2 are definitely worth building. Excalibur's blueprint can be bought in the market and his parts can be farmed off the boss Lekkril on Mars. The mission node is called War. Mag's blueprint can also be bought in the market and her parts can be farmed by killing the boss Sergeant on the planet Phobos with the mission node called Iliad. Super hard boss, really hard to kill, sneeze and he falls over. Volt's blueprint and parts can be obtained from your clan dojo. If you're not part of a clan dojo, I would highly recommend joining one as soon as you can once you start the game. A lot of Warframes are obtainable through your clan dojo, and in order to have access to them, you need a clan. If you just want to play the game solo, don't worry about it. A lot of clans will just let you do your own thing, and they're more or less just being used right now in order to get clan-specific items, so there won't be many clans with restrictions. However, you can also run the Deviri circuit every week and choose a Warframe to get from that, because that's another optional way to gain blueprints for certain Warframes. Deviri is accessible after you've completed Vor's Prize, the quest, which is more or less the starter quest, but that means that you can have access to Deviri almost straight away. But it will mean completing the Deviri quest and unlocking the circuit in order to get the 3 weekly frame options. And then it's going to mean running the circuit until you fill all 10 levels and get the parts that you need. Now, this is the list of Warframes available in the Deviri circuit. At the time of recording this, we are on week 4, which is Saren, Vauban and Nova. Once it goes down through all of the weeks, it just cycles back to week 1. Now, Saren is a monster. Like I said, that's who's on offer this week. And if you see her in the circuit, I would highly recommend picking her up. In my eyes, she is the single best Warframe in late game right now. There's power creep and then there is Saren. That's how good she is. So aside from the 3 starter Warframes, which are worthy for you to farm and get your hands on, what frames should you look at next? The obvious answer for a lot of veterans will be Rhino, right? The first frame that you can get to farm in the star chart of the Jackal boss on the Venus mission node Fossa. Rhino is the first tank that you will come across and ideal for new players learning the game because he has a damage reduction ability in Iron Skin and a damage buffing ability in his Roar. Iron Skin, when cast, will absorb incoming damage and convert it into Iron Skin health and Overguard, giving you an extra layer of effective health that enemies have to burn through in order to hit your actual health. It also makes you invulnerable for a few seconds when you cast it. Now, his Roar ability will boost you and your teammates' damage by a set amount, but this amount will increase depending on the power strength that your Rhino has. Rhino also has Stomp for crowd control and his charge ability for a little bit of mobility at the same time. This would be a very basic starter build for Rhino until you would get your hands on better mods. Duration for roar, power strength for stronger buffs, and of course for more damage. Efficiency mods will also help with being able to cast more abilities more frequently, and steel fiber will increase the effectiveness of his iron skin. But there are plenty of very in-depth detailed guides on YouTube or online for Rhino and how you should mod him later on in the game if he sounds like a Warframe that suits your playstyle. But let's move on. Nova is currently my most used Warframe, well, Nova Prime. She is incredibly useful. She can speed up or slow down missions depending on high or low power strength values, but her tank build around Nullstar is what helped me a lot when using her. She can also nuke rooms with her antimatter drop ability, and she can increase the damage output for you and your teammates by using Molecular Prime on enemies. She also scales really well into late game, but then again, I think the majority of Warframes we have right now do that simply because of, I guess, the things we have at our disposal that make us so damn powerful. Nova's blueprint can be bought from the market, and her parts can be farmed off the Raptor boss on the Europa planet node Nama, and she will show up on rotation in the circuit as well. Duration mods will play a huge part in Nova's setup. Duration affects the distance her Molecular Prime will travel. It affects how many null stars she has that will orbit her, and null stars will reduce incoming damage by 5% for each one, so 18 null stars will give you the maximum of 90% damage reduction, which is about 300% duration, give or take. She can be modded for speed or for slow. Above 100% power strength will cause her Molecular Prime to slow enemies, but the slow percentage maxes out at about 145% power strength, and below 100% will speed enemies up, which is absolutely amazing for running certain missions faster, like mobile defenses or defenses. So Nova is definitely a worthy option for a new player to pick up. However, just be aware that speed Novas in certain public missions might not be as welcomed by players in that group who might not be expecting a speed Nova. Now, Zephyr is a Warframe that offers a blend of crowd control, defense, and area damaging abilities that makes her pretty unique. She can also glide or fly depending on your builds later on. To begin with, however, she's just a really solid option to pick up as a Warframe. You can get her parts from the Tenno Lab in your clan dojo, so again, another reason for you to join a clan, which again are pretty straightforward. A lot of clans have no real restrictions except being active, which is what mine has. I have no problem adding players just so that they can get their hands on the items that they need. Now, Zephyr offers protection with her Turbulence ability, which protects against incoming bullets but not melee attacks or explosions. Her Airburst will group or scatter enemies depending on whether you tap the ability or hold the ability button down, and her Tornado ability is used to group enemies up, but the unique setup for this ability means that tornadoes will absorb all incoming damage and status effects applied to them by your own guns. It will also share those status effects around among all of the trapped enemies, causing massive amounts of damage. Nukes later on. Now, new players modding Zephyr will mean focusing on range, duration, and power strength. Duration for turbulence and for tornadoes. Efficiency, because spending less energy per ability means being able to cast more in a pinch. Efficiency on every frame is kind of needed as a new player. Flow for a larger energy pool, and range and strength will help tornadoes and airburst. Now, modding weapons for viral will also help Zephyr out in a huge way, because her tornadoes will then spread the viral faster, and in doing so will increase the damage that those enemies take. But that's pretty much Zephyr. She is a solid pick for a new player option after you're done with any of those new starter frames. Now, my next pick would be Gara. Gara is an incredibly versatile choice for new players when picking up more Warframes. Her blueprint is awarded for finishing the Saya's Vigil quest, and her parts will drop from the plains of Eidolon bounties, or her parts show up in week 10 of the Deviri circuit, whichever you want to do first. Needing them on Plains of Eidolon bounties will mean having to complete the Plains of Eidolon quests and all of that as well. Her Splinter Storm gives damage reduction, and she can control large areas with Mass Vitrify. Her abilities will require a little bit of practice to master, but once you get to know Gara and her playset, she is capable of dealing and reducing huge amounts of damage. Now, her Splinter Storm can give 90% damage reduction. All you're going to need equipped is one Intensify mod maxed out to hit that 90%. and she can cast it on herself, on teammates, and even on defense objectives. It deals damage over time on enemies and increases their damage vulnerability as well, so they're going to take more damage if they have Splinter Storm on them. Her Mass Vitrify will create a protective wall around objectives, but also it can be shattered with her first ability, Shattering Lash, for an explosion of glass. There is also this awesome interaction of shattering the Mass Vitrify wall with that Shattering Lash ability, while her Splinter Storm ability is active on her, which will then give the Splinter Storm 50% of the glass fragments absorbed into it from that wall's explosion as permanent damage to your Splinter Storm, while also refreshing the Splinter Storm's duration. This turns your Gara into a walking glass tornado that kills absolutely everything in its path. Now, Gara should be modded for ability strength for her Lash, her Storm, and her Wall abilities, duration for the Splinter Storm and Mass Vitrify, range mods, and of course efficiency mods as well. Like I said, the build I showed at the start, which is pretty much the default build you're going to use on a lot of Warframes to begin with. There's a lot of much finer details about min-maxing a Gara in Warframe to get the most out of her and turn her into an absolute powerhouse that you can find in a lot of build guide videos on YouTube by some of Warframe's best content creators. So if you pick up Gara, make sure and search for some of those videos. Now, my fifth choice for, I guess, Warframes to pick up after you're done with the starter Warframe would be Frost. Frost is a Warframe that right now is in a really good place. He is another defensive frame to begin with. Later on, with the help of his augments, he opens up into something completely different. But for a beginner, he is invaluable for protecting defensive objectives with his Snow Globe ability. But to acquire him, you will have to defeat the duo boss fight of Lek Krill and Captain Vor on Exta, the mission node, which is on the planet Ceres. Now, to begin with, he's all about defense, but later on, like I said, he's a crit buffing, armor stripping, crowd controlling powerhouse. His Ice Wave ability has got decent crowd control, especially when modding it for range. It's good for just slowing enemies down to start off with as a new player. His Snow Globe, when cast, will absorb incoming enemy damage on top of your equipped armor mods and power strength mods, which will already improve the globe's health, but the absorbs will improve it even further. Kind of like what Rhino's Iron Skin does, but again, there are much more detailed guides if you want to min-max your Frost later on. But as a starter option for a beginner Warframe, you can't really go wrong with Frost. His Avalanche ability will strip armor temporarily, while also freezing enemies in place. I think to strip armor, you need somewhere around 165% power strength. This would be an example of a beginner Frost build. Power Strength to increase the effectiveness of Ice Wave, Avalanche, and of course Snow Globe, duration and range mods as well, and efficiency to help you with ability spam if you need it. But he is a Warframe that when you're starting out and you're trying to get through the star chart, and maybe you're doing it on your own, maybe you're not joining a clan, or maybe you just prefer playing solo, having that Snow Globe over a defensive objective helps you in a huge way to progress through the star chart. But by the time you get to the end of the star chart, I guess you're no longer a new player. Now, of course, there are plenty, and I mean plenty, of worthy mentions in terms of what Warframes you could go for next, and everyone within the Warframe community is going to maybe recommend different groups of frames for you. Out of the worthy mentions, I would say Nekros is one that I feel every player should have. He is a bit more of an advanced frame for new players since his blueprint is acquired from defeating Lephanthis on the Orokin Derelict Assassination mission on Deimos, and you have to craft keys in order to run those missions, but every player, like I said, should have a Nekros. He is the loot king, and since Warframe is a resource grinding game and Nekros gives you a chance to get additional resources with his Desecrate ability, having him, in my opinion, is a must-have. He will speed up your resource grind. Other Warframes worth mentioning for you to pick up as a new player after you're done with either Excalibur, Mag, or Volt would be Nezha, Trinity, Ember, Oberon, whose parts literally drop from any Eximus unit. Even Mesa, which would be maybe a reach, eventually would be one, but my 5 for fresh beginner players would be Rhino, Nova, Zephyr, Gara, and Frost. 5 frames that have damage reduction abilities, crowd control, and can dish out damage or buff your damage in some way. So they are kind of nicely balanced until you learn the game, and then you're going to go after, I guess, the frames that absolutely decimate. Not saying that these 5 can't, because they can once you've put enough time into them, but feel free to let me know in the comment section below which Warframes you would recommend to new players if you're a veteran in my comment section, or if you were starting again, what would you tell yourself? Which frame would you tell yourself to get your hands on quickly? Now, the circuit in Deviri, as I've mentioned a few times in this video, is an option to pick up some of your new Warframes on normal difficulty for the star chart, but remember that you will need to complete the Deviri quest first, and you will also need to farm the normal star chart for resources that you're going to need in order to build each component for each one of these Warframe blueprints that you pick up in the circuit, or even in your Tenolab dojo, or whichever boss they drop from. So it's basically still going to be a grind. But that's the end of the video. I tried to keep it as short and sweet and to the point as I possibly could. Have a great day, have a great week, and as always, thanks for watching.